Hi, everyone. Very good morning. Welcome to the webinar, which is on conquering the expansion sale. We have Carol Cohen with us, who is the VP of Learning Strategy and Sales Enablement at Infopro Learning. And he will be spearheading the webinar ahead. Over to you, Carol.
Well, I think we'll wait a couple more minutes because I see
Sure.
people are coming in and we can get started. But thank you all for joining, and I'm looking forward to a really exciting conversation. I hope you're ready to speak up at the end and let us talk about the subject. So we'll give
And
it one more minute.
in case you want to speak up, kindly raise your hand. I can unmute yourself and you can ask your questions directly to Carol and get it answered. And you can learn from the experts.
It'll be good. I'll give it one more minute, and then we'll start. Okay, I'm going to share my desktop here. Put you people over here. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Welcome to Sales Talk. This is a quarterly online discussion, and I want to emphasize the word discussion. I'm going to say that multiple times during this thing, of important sales topics. And today our topic is one of my personal favorites, conquering the expansion sale. By now, you know all the rules and you know how to behave on a virtual call, but I want to emphasize a couple of things. Samnath already said it, but for those of you who just popped in, I want to repeat it. Every one of these points emphasizes the fact that I want you to talk. It has been a lifelong dream for me that on a webinar, the audience gets to talk to the speaker. And the thrill for me is that my dream has finally come true. That and going into a restaurant and ordering a Diet Coke and a Diet Pepsi at the same time. That's my other dream. But this one has come true. So notice the standard rules, but they all include the fact that you can speak, and I've left plenty of time for you to do that. So quickly, who am I? As Samnath mentioned, I lead the learning strategy and sales training practice here at Infopro. And I started out as a fourth generation teacher in high school English. My daughter is now a fifth generation teacher, teaching high school music up in New Hampshire. But once I finished teaching 14 years in high school, I transitioned to corporate training. And I found myself getting really excited about sales training. Not everyone does. And so that became my career for a long time. And my background in student-centered teaching also helped with that, because then designing and developing learner-centric programs became the focal point of my career. I found myself sort of exploding with ideas about this stuff, and I wrote a couple of books. You can see them listed here on the slide. One of them is Real Selling. It's about sales. It's about what to do post-COVID after all the different sales methodologies have been presented to you and what you're supposed to do to that. But then I went on Amazon and I realized there were just plain no books on, literally no books on building sales training. And so I wrote the book Empower Sales Success with Effective Sales Training. And the cool thing is I just added a little tag to that. I've been nominated to win a book award for it. I'll find out in 2 weeks whether I got a gold, silver, or bronze medal for that, so I'm quite psyched about that. But anyway, with all that history, I can tell you that with confidence that it's not just sales training that gets me inspired and excited. It's that I love empowering adult learning professionals to reach beyond their project and unlock potential, and I love enabling the success of salespeople. So that's kind of my thing. So what do I mean by real selling? I just want to touch on this a little bit. Because I've been in the corporate environment doing sales training and working in sales enablement for a long time, and it wasn't until 4 years ago I joined a vendor that provides this. Um, I really have been thinking about sales training for a long time, and I'm familiar with most all the methodologies that you've probably been familiar with over the years, but it's really truly my passion. And so this is really what real is. It's an acronym. It's not a new methodology, it's an approach. And there have been so many methodologies that have come out in the last 10, 15 years. Some of them have stuck. Some of them are really stuck in everyone's brain, like Challenger or spin selling. Um, Others just get incorporated into your process, like relationship selling and social selling or solution selling. And I say all those methodologies have kind of formed a patchwork quilt of what works. And most salespeople are operating with that patchwork quilt. But I felt like it was important to establish an approach that would emphasize the practical applications that have to happen to use those methodologies. And that's where real comes in. Research, engage with the customer, that covers your trust, building trust, engaging, asking the right questions. Advocate for the customer. This is where we're making a switch to a very customer-centric approach. And to me, that was accelerated by COVID, because as buyers, we just changed our whole pattern. We didn't go to salespeople if we didn't need them. We could buy everything online. We don't always need a salesperson, but when we do, that's the key thing. So advocate for the customer and of course lead to the solution rather than with the solution. Why? Because if you lead with the solution, they get all your information and they Google it and they find the cheapest, right? And so you lose the deal right there. So we have a sales training practice based on this. It has all these 2-hour modules that kind of click together like Lego blocks, and we can talk to you about that if you're interested. But today, I really want to focus on what to do in the expansion sale in this context of understanding your customer, engaging properly with them, advocating for their success, and leading to the solution when appropriate, which happens in the expansion sale. So the main thing I like to talk about here is intent. And it's understanding the intent of the customer, what's motivating them, what's happening with them, but also establishing your own intent, your own customer-centric intent. And so that's where the details of real come in, because if you look at research, engage, advocate for the customer, and lead to the solution, it's really a practical application. It's really the way to establish sort of a reinforcement of a relationship through a solid approach. That means that, you know, if you're doing spin selling or social selling or something, you've got those fundamentals, but you can put it in this practical context and it will really help. Now, it helps in terms of establishing you as a foundation of strength as a valued partner. And while this occurs in the initial sale, it's critical to support the expansion sale. And it begins with your intent, which is to enable the success of the customer for the long term. I want to emphasize that. Like a lot of people will say in sales, they'll say like, oh, well, my intent is to close this many deals by the 30th. If that's your intent, you go into conversations with customers, maybe a little fearful they're not going to take the deal. Maybe you're nervous. If your intent is to enable their success, your fear like falls away because you're there to help them succeed. And they feel that. And the thing that's so important is look at our situation right now as far as what we buy. We buy so many things that have licensing agreements and long-term renewal situations. There's either software as a service, a streaming service, some kind of business support service. There's so much of that. And that requires that we really have faith and loyalty to that customer so we re-up. And that's what we're talking about, not just expansion sale of increasing products, but maybe it's renewing licenses as well. So notice how the components of Real are 100% customer centric, requiring trust, empathy, and the ability to align value. And that's what's so important. Now I'm going to talk today as if you're the salespeople, but I've put some sales training tips in there for those of you who join as sales training people, because I think they kind of go hand in hand, and it's really kind of important to think about that way. So by now you've heard all the news that's raging about how we're all going to be out of our jobs because of AI. I love to tell the story that every modern technology has suffered the same fearful fate. Someone once said that with this modern technology, there won't be any more teachers in the world. And they were talking about film back in the 20s. I just saw a cartoon posted on Facebook of something, like an editorial cartoon that was created back in, I don't know when, 1800s, about electricity and how it was going to kill everyone. So every time there's a new technology, people get very nervous that the disruption is going to change the world. Well, it probably will change the world, but we're going to adapt on that life cycle of the adoption of that new technology, and we're going to be okay because we're going to be agile and we're going to adapt because teachers still exist and sales training is still going to exist and salespeople are still going to exist. Why? Because people value people and they want to be valued by people. And that forms a sales relationship. So if you think about that, especially if you're in a SaaS situation or you're in one of these situations where you want to have long-term relationship with your customer for expanding their deal and your footprint in that account, it's establishing that valued relationship that is so critically important. So in this day and age, the relationship delivers specific value to a customer. It forms the foundation to build on for the long term. And we all buy everything transactionally online. We don't need salespeople to do that. But when we do need them, we need someone who really understands us and cares about us. And no offense, that is not AI. AI doesn't care about me. AI will tell me that they answered my question already on the chat, right? There's a lot that AI can do to support you, but there's a whole other webinar we can do on that. But it's not going to replace the consultative seller. So when it comes to the expansion sale, the importance of the valued partner relationship grows exponentially. And to differentiate the value to clients in the expansion sale, you build on the status quo, which you created by reinforcing the value of your partnership in the beginning, being careful not to disrupt what you built, and close the messaging void. That's what kills you every time. You make the sale and then you go away for a really long time. That messaging void often happens in the sales cycle, and that's a danger zone for you. So you evolve with the customer, staying in touch as you reinforce your good relationship, and you put every conversation in the customer context. Finally, you set your intent to enable their success in the context of their industry and the market trends that impact them. That's where the research comes in. You need to really know about their industry, know about why they do things, what their business goals are, what are the pressures on them. So it's not a deal, it's a relationship. So for so long we use these terms cross-sell and upsell. I hate them. When we really mean the expansion sale. Now, why do we want to change the terminology? Because when you're talking about the cross-sell, and you're talking about the upsell, you're looking at your own product line and your own divisions, your silos, the business units. And when we say expansion sale, we're looking at the customer. We're looking at your relationship with the customer. And we're looking at how you expand that relationship, expand that footprint, expand that share of wallet within the customer, and provide expanded value for the customer. So it's almost like a physical thing. Like if you just stop saying cross sell and upsell and start saying expansion sale, it changes your whole like sort of physical and mental approach to what you're trying to do. So the term expansion sale is something aligned to customer centricity and establishing customer loyalty. And we're going to talk about the loyalty loop in a minute. So the difference is the status quo. And how do you instantiate that difference? First, you establish the value with your initial sale and you track that value. Now, this is a trick. You can't just say, oh, we have a generic value and you're going to get it. You got to say, like, okay, if you get this product or service, we expect this kind of value. Let's talk about what that might mean to your business, and then let's track it. So we track that result, and you ensure that you're making changes, whatever it is, the behavior, the people in their company, the promised business results that you offered them, whatever value, or sometimes it's a customer survey that you want to influence. You align everything that you do to making a difference to the bottom line for your client or your customer. And when you sold originally, you sold against a status quo where you weren't there. You basically said you're doing something now, and if you do it with us, there's going to be a change and it's going to be better. And you're making a plan from status quo of not you to you. But when you're looking at it for an expansion sale, and this is where it gets tricky, you're building on the value that you already promised. Now that means the status quo is different from the first time you sold. So you have to articulate that new value in that new area now. So as you expand in the account, you may be in a different department that you're working with. You may be talking to different people, but you're referencing the value that you already delivered the previous department, or you're building on the department or that same customer. Whatever it is, the context is you're there now, you're the status quo. And it could be that you want to sell more of something, or you want to sell something different, or offer a new feature, or maybe you just want to ensure that they renew their license. Whatever it is, that means you're aligning that value on top of the value you already delivered, which means you better be fluent in whatever that value is, whatever that promise was. It's not easy because you might disrupt the happiness of the status quo. You don't want to say the status quo is bad, right? So you've got to think about how evolving is important to their business. Now, I keep saying build a foundation of value. It's absolutely critical that you understand that initial current state of your customer and then the current state that they have once they've bought from you. And when we refer to that status quo, we mean what is going on now. And in an expansion sale, that means whatever value the promise was that you built initially, you're building on that. So consider the promise that you made in the initial sale as that foundation, and build on that value as you work with the customer to expand the sale and the footprint in the account. And you really need to listen more than you talk at this point. You need to hear what the customer has already achieved based on what you've already sold to them. And you need to listen for the good and the bad in the relationship. Now, sometimes this is going to reveal gaps which require additional sales, or they may require some fixing, but that's an opportunity still. Other times there are, some real glitches, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if there's a concern that you really have to provide a rapid response, because remember, it's a relationship. And it isn't a scary relationship. It's a relationship. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be things that happen, but you're the valued partner. And this is where your engagement with the customer, building that high trust, advocating for their success becomes the most powerful tool. It's a more powerful tool than the value of what you're selling, really, because they turn to you. They turn to you for answers, and that's what's important in the relationship. Now, you also have to consider this sort of unconscious needs or limitations that continue to exist in their current state even after the first purchase. So you have to demonstrate that your innovative approach is going to fill those gaps, and for that to work, you have to have a before and after kind of success story that reinforces the value that they've received. And that means really tracking, like I said earlier, begin with those tough questions about how is this going to change your business? What are you really tracking in your company that has caused you to want to buy what I'm selling you? And what do you think we can do? I mean, sometimes, you're sort of guessing at that point, and you might pick something, like we're going to increase your, uh, you know, customer survey by 2 points. Give yourself a target and then with them track it. Sometimes you grossly underestimate what the impact will be. Sometimes you overestimate, but either way you're doing it together. But you leverage the trust you've already built. And there's a quote here from this book at Expansion Sales, pretty good. I mean, it's more of a data-driven book, but it's a good book by Eric Peterson and Tim Reisterer. Um, and what I take their quote to mean is that if you take a disruptive approach, or you act like you're showing up for the first time, even though they're already a customer, you're selling against yourself. And you both win and lose at the same time. When that happens, usually lose. So think of it more as an evolution in your relationship. You're evolving with them because you're all on sort of this journey to their new business value. Companies change, they reorganize, they do things. Customers change their needs or their situations. And so if you look at it as evolving with them, they begin as a prospect, and then they become an existing customer, and then that turns into the valued partnership that allows you to respond to the things that happen, like the gaps and shortfalls, but also because they look to you for help. So according to Peterson and Reisterer, these are the rules for success. You're evolving with the customer to ensure they stay. So you have to document your results. That's really important. You can't guess at that stuff. You got to say, like, look, we sold you this thing before and we really wanted this to happen. Did it happen? How is it working? What can we do to do more of that? And what can we do differently going forward? Um, but that's your original value promise. And then you need to really understand those pressures that exist in the market and their competition. In the market, things change all the time. Look for gaps and shortfalls and be ready to be rapid response about those. You're their best friend. You're their valued partner. Who else are they going to turn to? You don't want them to turn to the competition for an answer. You want to be able to resolve anything they uncover right away. And then also be sure you're focusing on the risk of no change. There's a value in staying with you. There's a value for this relationship, for your products, for your additional products. And so that's really important. And be sure you're focusing on that upside value of like, what is the reason and how am I supporting your business or your success or your happiness, depending on what your conversation is. Now, the conversations actually become easy as you establish that relationship for the long term. Now, one of the things we talk about all the time at Infopro is the success plan. Now, of course, we're a learning organization and we think of it in terms of learning and the training world, but it also applies to just about everything else. Donald Kirkpatrick came up with 4 levels of evaluation. Even if you're not in training, I'm sure you're familiar with it because you've filled out somebody's survey along the way. Um, And there are levels of the evaluation, and the easy ones are, how'd you like the thing, and that kind of user experience kind of survey or a typical learning check or test of your knowledge. But levels 3 and 4 are business results and behavior change. And those levels are the ones to really focus on in a sales environment. What is this going to do for your customer? What can they do because of it? And often people struggle with these questions, and I don't really know why, because I think customers and people want to talk about what they expect to get out of something. And so really understand what a certain project, product, service is going to do for them and why it matters to them and what they track. How do they determine that they're actually getting what they want? And have that conversation right up front so you can track those results along the way. Now, I want to be clear. The value is what the customer can do differently once they acquire your product or service. Now, you've likely seen support materials that define the benefits. So let me clarify the terms. A description of the product's features is found in the manual, quite dry. The benefits are on the poster or the ad, or you see it on TV. I call that generic because those are the sort of general swath of benefits for everybody. But when you get into value, it's where you take those benefits and you ask, so what can you do differently or better because of this product to take that benefit and turn it into value to you? And I'll give you an example. For instance, I was working for an ERP software company, and they used to say, it's a single source of truth, and they dropped the mic. And it would be like, yeah, a single source of truth is a perfect benefit, but it isn't the value to that particular customer. You have to interpret the single source of truth into something that the customer can do differently or better because they have a single source of truth, which in one case may be that they're pulling financial reports, and instead of taking 25 hours to do it because they're pulling from all different sources all over their company, they can pull from one source, one single source of truth, and they can complete their annual audit documentation in a day, in a few hours. So you can see how you need to interpret those benefits into specific value for that customer. And that's really important for an expansion sale because you're building on that mindset all along the way. So the main thing is to ask them what they measure now. How do they measure success? Now, I would even say if you were selling me Netflix, you could still ask me, like, how much do I watch? How much do I go out to movies and spend money on movies and want to have them access? How many times do I want to watch the same movie over and over? You need to ask, like, what is my rubric for success as a customer? And usually it comes down to saving money or time or something. It's also building customer loyalty on their part. It may be you're a B2B and you're looking at a company that is looking for building customer loyalty or brand recognition or something like that. But you have to sort of message your deals differently when it's an expansion sale from when you do it the first time, because like I said, you're going against a different status quo. So you communicate results early, and because you are the status quo, you should have access to some of those answers about what it already means to be involved in the deal. And you can't drop the ball and show up a year later and say, so what can we do for you now? Just check it in after a year. You really do need to be in, do I want to say constant contact, but you need to be in sort of a regular contact with your client or customer or have some kind of like interaction with them so that message gap doesn't exist. Review your prior decisions, check in with them quarterly or whatever, but align to their evolving needs. Listen for cues that something changing, that they may need something different, because you're their partner in all this. And we know that every business, every organization evolves and changes, and you should be on top of that. So for successful expansion sales, you really have to explain that success plan. Like, how are you measuring it? Set the business goals, track that success, pay attention to the world and what those pressures are on your client, and paint a world where the customer sees themselves on the road to success. They are the hero of the story. Consider the progress they've made already and understand the reality of their situation and the opportunity that it provides. So you focus on that customer in every conversation and write the story. They're the hero. They're the hero. Your product's not the hero. Their success because of your product is the hero. So the main thing here is, and I am kind of wrapping up so we can talk to each other about this. You probably heard the term customer centricity. You've either heard it in your workplace, or you may have even heard it from your customers. They may be trying to be more customer centric. Everyone is trying to be more customer centric. And this is partly an outcome of what I'm calling the great accelerator, COVID. We thought COVID like stopped us in our tracks, but what it actually did is it forced us to accelerate adoption of online purchasing. It changed the buyer. I mean, like, I'll tell you, I don't go into stores because stores limit my choices. I can go online, I can buy just about everything. And I literally do. I mean, it isn't based on price or anything like that. I can buy a very big thing online without a salesperson. But like I said before, when I need a salesperson, I need a really good salesperson. I need somebody who really understands me and my situation. And I work with a lot of companies and I see the same thing. They need partners that understand them, that can anticipate what's going on with them, that can help them overcome their need to change and evolve. And that partnership is critical to the expansion sale. So they expect a truly customer-centric conversation. And you know that because they write reviews on Google. They make their frustrations known in Nextdoor about services and product providers that they work with. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see people say, you know, like, I went to talk to the cable company and they wouldn't even talk to me, or I couldn't get out of the menu on the phone. All these things add up to impact on customer loyalty and their willingness, especially in the case of a SaaS situation, their willingness to update that license, to renew that license. So throughout all this, you need to be thinking about the loyalty loop and get out of that transactional approach. Now I know this is a little like cuckoo looking, but I like to think about it. And a long time ago, someone came up with the idea of the loyalty loop, and I just added a bunch of confusing dots and words to it. But just remember, the customer story does not end when the deal closes. The customer's on a journey, and it's more like a loop. And as you travel with them on that loop, you have to tell the story differently as you go through the different stages. Because now you're the valued business partner. So don't let the message void take over. The loyalty loop shows the usual path of a customer relationship with a vendor. And you think about it as kind of a sales cycle at the beginning, but then you establish your value with that customer. And then they use your product or service and they begin to realize the return on investment, which of course you're tracking and talking to them about. And eventually the customer gets to a turning point where they have to choose to do something new or different. And this is interesting because at this point, it could be because you have an annual license and they have to renew, and maybe they want to think, am I spending too much money? Do I want to do something different? Maybe it's because their procurement department says they have to analyze it every year. and they have external pressure to do it. But whatever it is, they get to that turning point where they have to do something new or different. And if you're lucky, they're loyal to you and they just buy from you again automatically. Now, nowadays with social media and everything, they're likely to make a reference to you online, but they'll also read all kinds of other reviews online that may spark an interest in looking at someone different. Um, During this phase, they may talk to their peers and colleagues, and some of them may be your prospects or customers. They may influence your prospects to buy from you. They may talk to other customers who maybe aren't happy and they may think they shouldn't continue with you. Whatever it is, they're talking to people at this turning point. They may be talking to people in other departments. They may be talking to the new guy who is used to a whole different solution and he's telling them what to do. But all of this is influenced by their loyalty. So if your loyalty is very strong and they get to this turning point, then they can easily stay with you. If it isn't strong, they can easily choose a different vendor or product. And so they can go back to the previous vendor that they had before they did you, and they can think of you as a 1-year trial. So it's important to know that everything counts. And you have to recognize that you can't take for granted that loyalty. You have to nurture that loyalty to ensure those next deals. And you see how that messaging gap can really affect this. And what the customer might call sound of silence can contribute to missing that expansion opportunity. So you stay in touch and you maintain that customer-centric relationship. Now, this is a thing that I think is really interesting. It's really my last thing. The true test of a successful transition from transactional to consultative is a thing called the service recovery paradox. I think that's a pretty funny word, but service recovery paradox. It's based on a study of customer reactions where they found that customers who had survived some kind of service failure with a recovery in partnership with their vendor made them more loyal to the vendor than the customer that never experienced a failure at all. Isn't that interesting? Now, that doesn't mean go contrive a failure so that you can recover from it to gain more loyalty. But it does mean that handling and recovering from errors, goofs, gaps, whatever happens, will in fact enhance your ability to maintain that relationship and conclude successful expansion sales. Now, I think that is so interesting because people panic if there's a failure, right? Or there's some customer is unhappy about something or something went wrong and everybody's hair's on fire and everybody's going crazy. Think about the service recovery paradox. If you're in that relationship and you've established that loyalty and you've established that valued partnership and you go in and you go like, wow, this is a terrible thing and I'm terribly, terribly sorry. How are we together going to fix this? That recovery builds more loyalty according to that service recovery paradox. I just think that's so interesting. So think about it like every good relationship, you have to seriously consider the good and the bad. And yes, there's success, but sometimes if something's wonky, you can't ignore it. Saying you're sorry should be as easy as saying yes when they signed the original contract. Since your intention is to support their success, that means you have to provide rapid response to just about everything. And you have to apologize and very quickly fix what is wrong. And don't think presents or free stuff is going to solve it. When something happens, you really have to take the 2 minutes to figure out what is the impact on you and what do we have to do to solve whatever that impact is, not just make things better for your, when you look at us, you see something is better. We're solving the problem for you, customer, whatever that is. But the measure of your success will be the health of that loyalty loop. and ensuring the success of the customer and their business aligns perfectly with your intent to support their goals. I love the basketball coach's quote, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. You hope the mistakes are exceedingly rare, but they happen. And as a partner, you just have to own it. By recognizing the loyalty loop and ensuring there's no message gap, your partnership can withstand gaps and goofs and things that happen inevitably. And the best way to handle it is to handle it together with the customer. So before we start talking about this, and I hope we do, I pulled out just some key takeaways just so you can remember kind of what I just hammered through very quickly. But I guess the most important thing to think about is the expansion sale is different. It's customer focused. It's an expansion of your relationship with your customer versus a cross-sell, upsell for the business. I mean, that'll happen, but that isn't how you should think about it. Think about it customer focused. And it requires that long-term partnership with your customer where you stay in communication, you don't allow that messaging gap to occur, and it's where you're right on top of whatever is going on so that if there's gaps or something happens in the market, or some trend occurs that really changes what's going on with them, you're there together and you help them recover and you help them through with agility so that they can survive whatever that is. And know that recovery can actually enhance your relationship and improve that loyalty. I just think that's so cool. And visualize that loyalty loop in your head, like where are they in considering the renewal, or where are they in considering something new or expanded in your account, and ensure they're recommending you. Ensure that they're thinking highly of you, and that they're providing reviews of your work, and that they truly value your relationship. And what that means is they'll stay with you and they'll continue to license your service or buy additional products from you. It is a huge opportunity. So I have a little quote here about it's about your attitude. Mr. Zig Ziglar, the super salesman, left behind a whole lot of quotes, and this is the one about attitude. But it's my belief that having that customer-centric attitude that focuses on the expansion of their business rather than the cross-sell and upsell of your products will actually return more in sales. And if your attitude is based on the intent to improve the customer's success, you will always win. You will always win. So as I said earlier, Infopro is a full service learning provider. And included in that, we offer many assets to help you do what you do. So my colleague Somnath is going to put into the chat some additional resources that are available to you for free. The first is a masterclass. I've got a series of short videos about building sales training, and it provides a lot of tips about that. And we also have some infographics and a video about real selling. And you can also sign up for a conversation with me if you want. There's a calendar link in there. I'm happy to talk to you. I'll talk to anybody about this stuff. I love it. I'm not that interested in buying some sales enablement product that you might be wanting to sell me, but I'm very happy to talk to you about your sales success and how we can sort of brainstorm it. So what I want to do is open up, the mic for the rest of the time and hear from you about your experience. Does any of this resonate with you? Does it seem weird or challenging? Is it something that you think is interesting? I'm gonna stop sharing, and all you have to do is raise your hand. Somnath will unmute you and we can have a
Yes.
conversation.
Thank you, Carol. It was really great. And we have a question from Dan. So he asked that, do you have any stories or examples of exceeding customer expectations, adding so much unexpected value that
Yeah.
new doors were opened for account expansion?
Thank you, Dan, my sidekick Dan from Infopro. Yes, Well, my favorite to tell you is that the first time I ever really applied this notion of the success plan to a program that we were selling to a client was when we were selling to a client who was it was a call center for a credit company, you know, like you get credit protection or whatever and you call up, and they were trying to do two things. Uh, One thing is they wanted to hear from the customer whatever their concern was, and then, as they would say, upsell or expand their sale to talk to them about some additional services that might be appropriate for them. Now you can see how if they were told to just upsell, it would be like, okay, have I solved your problem? Let me tell you about a product, versus let me listen to what you're talking about as your problem, and here's maybe something you might want to consider. So we had a goal for that. And then they also had a customer survey question at the end of every call. And the question I thought was super cool. They would ask them, would you hire this rep? Which I thought was a great question, versus, did we fulfill your problem? Are you going to tell your friends? Blah, blah, blah. It's just like simply, would you hire this rep or not? And they had a number like 92% said yes. And they said they wanted to increase it to like 97%. And I said, well, you know, like if we do this customer-centric training with them and we work on changing their behavior, I think we can raise it 2 points. I think we can go to 94. They agreed to that. So we set that as our marker. Now, the other one had to do with the sales conversions, which you understand if you're interested in expansion sales, converting to a sales call for additional services. And they had a goal for that as well. And they had a number of times that the calls enabled that conversation. And so we had a number also with that. The one thing we found out right away after 6 to 8 months was that we had improved their number of yes answers to the would you hire the rep up to 96%. So it was even higher than what we had set as a goal, but we were tracking it along the way. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying it's a relationship. You're not done when you get the deal and then you come back and sell another deal. You are in a relationship with them where you say, like, look, I care about your results. I think this is what we can do. I want to do more with you. Let's track it along the way. Maybe we underestimated what we could do. Maybe we can do more. So I think it really is just kind of a change in the way that you think about that relationship with the customer. And you try to sort of, I know it's very hard. Sometimes it feels like it's hard to talk about those things, but the truth is the customer is already thinking about those things. If you're providing a service, like for instance, I was in a company that was selling, like I said, an ERP software for manufacturing. There were many things that we could say that software would influence in that customer account as a automotive supplier, in terms of time and money. We just needed to have that conversation early so that when we talk to them later, in our life cycle, think of that loyalty loop again. As we're talking to them later, we're not just saying, hey, how'd it go? You know, that's what people would do to me all the time. They come back a year later and go, how did it go? What was your business result? It's like, well, you didn't care about it at the beginning. Why do you care about it now? Care about it at the beginning. And that's what we did with that credit company. It was really wild. And we got such a great return. It was fantastic. So let me hear from somebody else. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments, or is this making sense?
Yeah,
Steve.
let me just unmute Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Steve, you are unmuted. You can ask any questions.
Right. I'm unmuted
Hey,
now, I think. Hi, Carol.
all right. Hey, Steve.
I'll tell you what I love about real sales is it goes totally with my own sort of thoughts, because I do a program I call the Secret Sales Force, where I say that everybody's first role is to serve the customer. and that everybody is responsible for sales and that everybody is responsible for profit. The challenge really is it has to come from the top, because otherwise it's only transient. It's no good saying service department responsible for service, sales department responsible for sales. And that's what happens, silos. If it doesn't start from the C-suite, it doesn't remain. Now, I've seen surveys from Capgemini and Bain's where there's a huge gap between what the customers believe is a good experience and what executives believe. And this is the challenge. We have to close that gap. But I love that the whole thing to me is about attitude and customer centricity. And that's what I love about real sales.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, to me, you know, old English teacher here, but I really believe that words matter. And that's why I think it's so important to change the mindset from the cross-sell, upsell attitude, because that's your C-suite attitude, right? How many widgets do we sell out of this business? And how can we sell more widgets? Just add them on. Do you want fries with that? Versus expansion sale, we're really establishing the long-term loyal customer relationship where you're with them for a long time. And when they hit that next milestone where they have to make a big change or something, who do they call? You, I hope. You, because you're their partner to figure out what to do next when that pressure happens or that change occurs or whatever it is. You're evolving as a company, they're evolving as a company, and be that partner. So I love that. Thanks for the validation, Steve. Well, I know we have a small group, so people shouldn't be shy about talking about their own situation. It's just us chickens, as we say. Well, you've got the links in the chat and everything, Somnath?
Yes, yes.
Then I will release the hostage
yes.
situation and we'll just close up shop here. But thank you everybody for sharing. Thanks for staying the whole time. And like I said, you can either click on the link for the calendar or you can go into LinkedIn and message me, and I'm happy to talk to you about this. I get very passionate about it, very excited about it. So thank you all very much. Take care.
Thank you very much, Carol. Have a great day ahead.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.